Supreme Court Justice Oliver Wendell Holmes is considered one of the greatest legal minds of the 20th century. And who better to bring him to life at Washington, D.C.'s Ford's Theater than veteran actor James Whitmore. Welcome to National Arts. I'm Mike Baker. On this program, we'll take a look at Emmett Lavery's The Magnificent Yankee, an intimate portrait of one of the greatest humanitarians ever to grace the Supreme Court. The play opens as Justice Holmes begins his tenure on the court at the age of 62 and traces his distinguished career as the champion of the common man. By his side throughout it all is trusted companion and confident wife Fanny, played beautifully by Audra Lindley. Together with Tony Award-winning director Peter Hunt, Whitmore and Lindley helped to frame a fascinating and precedent-setting era of legal jurisprudence.
Adams, you know, when I mustered out of the Civil War almost 40 years ago, people were telling me that this country was going to the dogs. And then when I went on the bench in Massachusetts 20 years ago, people were telling me the same damn thing. Now, we may not be out of the trenches, my boy, but we're a long way from the dogs.
Think about this man, wounded 3 times in the Civil War,
Yeah.
the last time shot through the neck. How did he survive?
Tough guy, yeah. Tough man, you know. Once again, genes. You know, his father was quite a considerable human being, a doctor and a writer and a poet. And as a result, of course, the son, having to walk in that shadow, was never quite comfortable with his father.
It's been said that Holmes almost had a disembodied mind, that he was able to step out of his body.
He never read the daily papers, which is very interesting indeed when you think about it. A man who was very much, who said if you do not participate in your times, you can well be said not to have lived at all. He didn't read the papers because he knew that that was just a reflection of a moment, you know, in time. And he was interested in the overview, the long pull, which unfortunately politicians cannot be. And really unfortunately.
He even commented in the play that he felt that once having gotten to age 40 that nothing significant could come after. I think maybe one of the reasons why he hastened to write The Common Law 5 days before he turned 40 years old.
Yeah, yeah. Maybe he felt his life, his judicial life, or legal life was over. It is still, I think, one of the most seminal works in the law is his Common Law.
The whole concept of free speech, which we see in the play,
yeah,
and the maintenance thereof, as well as the notion that the law evolves as civilization evolves. It's a living instrument, much like the Constitution.
Exactly. Yeah, well put. Yeah, that's exactly what he believed, and it's proving, hopefully, to be true. You know, we've seen so many changes down through the few years, you know, since Holmes left.
This Rosika Schwimmer opinion, that's a big fight. Oh yes, it's not just a question of denying to a sincere woman pacifist her citizenship. Oh no, it's a question of denying to ourselves what that citizenship should be. Freedom of opinion doesn't mean just freedom for the opinions we happen to like. It means just as much freedom for the opinions we happen to despise.
The common law that Holmes is known so well for. He seems to be able to just distill these notions that the law is this inanimate object and somehow find some truth in it, find a commonplace form of government that we can work under.
And also that it serves the needs of people, the real needs of people. Not necessarily the more popular needs, you know, whether it's a trend of the moment, but what people really need in the long pull.
Do you think his greatest epitaph was, he knew the truth?
Oh, gee, I don't know that any human being has ever given that. I really don't. And he says in the play, you know, that the universe that he's a part of must not be measured by your fears, but by your faith. But he says, I really don't know what keeps it all together from one moment to the next. So the truth, big T, I don't think it's given to any mortal.
You know, life isn't a question of how much evidence you have. You'll never have enough. It's a matter of how much faith you have. Faith, Fanny, in a universe that is not measured by your fears, but by your faith. That's the trick, Fanny.
Part of his humor, but also part of his scholarly nature was the fact that he could pierce right through a question to the heart of the matter and get where he needed to be, where everybody else seemed to flounder.
And in the for the long view. once again, for the long view, because free speech is not something that you just wear on your lapel and use when you want to. It's something that is absolutely essential, as a free press is, to our nation's survival.
And yet, even as he aged, he had this beautifully balanced mind.
Yes, he did. He regretted, but as he grew older, he possibly wasn't going to, he felt death near, that he wasn't going to be able to finish his study of Sanskrit, which is pretty extraordinary.
For Oliver Wendell Holmes, going to Washington at age 62, when he essentially thought his life was over, represented a reincarnation of sorts without death.
In those days, of course, people didn't live as long as they do now. It's interesting, you know, really, I don't know if people know this, but the progress we've made in terms of medicine. When I was born in 1921, the age expectancy was 53 years old. Kind of amazing. And now what's up in the late 70s and early, isn't it? For women, I know it's a lot longer than us folks.
No, but at age 61, it's possible for a man to fool himself, my dear, and not know it. There's no chance of our having arrived in Washington a bit late, is there?
Now, you know there isn't.
Oh, well, of course, Fanny, as usual, you're right. This is paradise. This is the promised land.
There was some concern as to how much he believed in when it came to the afterlife, and yet there seems to be a spiritual joy and adventure and a certain youth that he maintained all throughout his life.
Mm-hmm. Yes, the bones. And he loved young people. He adored, even though he abused, you know.
Yes.
He was rather abrupt with his secretaries and very demanding of his secretaries. He loved them. He really did.
Well, there was a certain bemusement there. Obviously, they respected him, but he had a charm and charisma, and he made them laugh.
Yeah, he was a curmudgeon, really, you know, that lovable curmudgeon.
Mason, what are you doing indoors on a day like this, my boy? Get out of here before I think of something for you to do.
Very good, sir, if you insist, but there is quite a little mail.
On a day like this, my boy, the mail can wait.
Because of a level of respect that he is afforded on stage, I think the young people that see this show will go away with a healthy appreciation of the contributions that not only older citizens have made, but some of our historic figures.
I would hope so. And also the love factor, love, quote, unquote, whatever that means, and I certainly don't know. I think that's important, the longevity of that respect, that mutual respect that they both shared.
I think we're telling our senior adults, too, that to retire is to die. And here is a man, essentially, who thought his life was over at 40 and began at 62. And for another 30 years, he changed the world.
Yeah. Yes, he did indeed. Certainly the way we view the law, yeah.
There are crocuses blooming on the White House lawn, and I picked this one just for you.
Oh, Wendell, you should.
It's all right. Mr. Roosevelt was not looking.
The relationship with Fanny is not only one of pure intellect, but it's one of pure love.
Absolutely, on a very strange level, too. Because she's most permissive in terms of other attachments or whatever. I don't mean sexual attachment, but they really did, yes. They tremendous respect, which it seems to me is one of the quotients of love that very often is neglected. True respect.
It's been said you need to take what you do seriously, and certainly Holmes did, but not to take yourself too seriously.
No, I don't think
she helped him stay grounded, didn't she?
You bet. Oh, must have, you know. Once again, we don't know. We'll never know what went on in a bedroom, or nor do we have a right to know. But yes, they seem to have counterbalanced each other beautifully.
Sit to the right of it, will I? Mr. Ambassador, you can tell the President for me that he could carve a better dinner companion out of a banana.
Audra, the play is pure love and pure intellect realized by two unforgettable people, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah. They were quite a pair.
As much love as it is intellect.
Oh, yeah. It was a great coming together of two people who, she says at the end, she says, trouble is I don't know what I want. I guess I've had just about everything a woman could want. And of course she didn't have children, which she regretted.
You're just as searchingly perceptive as Justice Holmes, aren't you?
You mean the character,
yes.
Fanny? Yes. She is. He said that she was his superior. That she gave him so much insight into cases that he needed to make decisions on, and she was a very wise woman.
The real trouble is that I don't agree with the dear lady's pacifist ideas at all.
Well, whether you agree with them or not has nothing to do with whether she'd become a good citizen.
Do you think Fanny was as important to the development of the judge as, say, the justices on the court?
Yes. Yes. Well, I'm interpreting the play. You know, Emmett Laver is the one who did the research. I didn't do it. I have to do what he wrote, you know. And in the play, she certainly was the greatest influence in his life.
You know, there were no women on the court at the time, but in reality, there was. There was you.
Yeah. And I'm sure maybe 8 other women as well.
Essentially, you are his grounding force. You are his compass. And he even mentions that a justice is the last person to know anything or to hear anything.
Yeah.
Without you,
he's so cloistered.
He'd be a wanderer.
Yeah, and she became the toast of Washington. She was very, very popular, and that's the second act when she's you know, giving tea parties and that sort of thing, and of course he's cloistered in the court, and she has to you know, make him aware of what's going on in the world. I thought the whole Louis Brandeis
yes.
thing was, and her setting it up, that he, you know, is invited for tea when she knows that the administration is going to call up the appointment of Justice Brandeis, and feels that the Senate will approve it.
A man can still look at a pretty woman without violating his marriage vows on the one hand, or the Constitution of the United States on the other.
Oh, please, Mr. Holmes, don't talk to me about the Constitution.
There's some allusions here to the judge's possible dalliances, and you use that to your advantage whenever you need to, don't you?
And I have read that it was true, that he did a lot of dallying, and that he had. It's not good for the play, though, to remember those. All you really want to concentrate on is the relationship between these two. She teased him a lot about the women. He liked women very much, and he was very apt to dally. But in the play, she doesn't take it too seriously.
It seems like when you're dealing with the judge that any fodder is fair game, as long as it's not mean-spirited.
She gets a little angry at times, and I thought there was a very strong feminist point of view expressed in the second act.
Now, you had a chance to do this play 20 years ago.
Yes.
The scene has changed somewhat. Our attitudes toward the court, towards law in general, have not changed that much, but civilization has evolved.
And I think that people are more informed. I find the play, I like the play much better now than I did 20 years ago. 20 years ago, I thought of it as just a wife who was always pouring tea and being social. And of course, that's not the case at all. I didn't appreciate it then, but then I've grown and developed as well, you know, as you know, people have become more knowledgeable. 20 years doesn't seem a very long time, but it can make a lot of difference.
You worked with the Tony-winning director Peter Hunt 20 years ago.
That's right.
Now, once again, this whole piece is being revisited. What has he learned, and what kind of new insight did he give you?
He has an eye, a sharp eye, and for detail, and he notices everything, and calls it to your attention, and it's like nothing escapes him. But I truly am amazed always at the fact that nothing seems to escape his very, very sharp eye, and he's right about all of it. And I've seen so many productions of his, and even had the privilege of being in a couple of them where he had very, very large casts. And as you know, 1776 was a magnificent production with so many, many, many people in it. And I was able to do the visit with him in Williamstown a couple of years ago, and that is, again, a huge production, and he's wonderful.
It's all right. They've confirmed my appointment. Ha! Only 22 votes against.
Welcome, brother. Welcome. Welcome to the Hall of Disagreement.
The play, of course, opened in 1946 in the Royal Theatre, but only 159 performances. Why do you think that was?
I really don't know. It certainly had sort of other legs. It went on to become a motion picture that MGM did with Louis Calhern, who played originally Holmes. And then I think in the early 60s, there was a black and white television production that with the Luntz that was made. So it keeps coming back.
There's a certain 30s acting style that you've infused into the piece. There's a certain aura of respect that just seems to emanate from every pore.
I think that's true. I think it's just a matter of really doing the piece as it is. We have made some small adjustments for today. I mean, there are certain things that are in the play that we cut that just wouldn't be acceptable to today's audience. But by and large, we are doing the piece and doing it with the conviction and the passion and the same way that perhaps it was done originally. And so there is truth to that, yes.
You've beautifully blocked Holmes so that he's not upstaged. And there are only two characters at any juncture that ever are on the same plane with him. And that's, of course, Judge Brandeis once he's elected to the High Court, and, of course, Fanny. I mean, you've been very careful to always put him in the fore.
Well, again, there's a sense of his position, both of the time and his position as the judge. And so there is a bit of that. I think in a little bit Owen Wister, he and Wister sometimes scrap it up a little bit. But it does help to set off the boys. And that's why, for example, when there is physical contact at the birthday party, when they shake hands, it makes that even more meaningful because there is coming together. Exactly.
You always had to be cognizant of not only the set and the costumes, but also the carriage of the individuals. And you made an interesting point when we were off camera that today's youth treat adults considerably different. And so you had a little lesson to teach there for the young clerks, didn't you?
Oh yeah, I just think that we're at a time when there was much more respect shown for elders, whether it was the Holmeses or not. And so certainly an elder coming into a room, everybody's up on their feet, and the sense of distance, and you could show affection for a person, but it was always done at a distance. And so that's all in the staging, that you understand how close and how these young people revere this man, and yet it's done within the time.
The piece was done, of course, in '46. How has the significance of this piece changed since '46? And is he just as big a legal figure today as he was, say, in '46 or when he passed?
Well, it's very interesting. I think by and large, yes, he is. Of course, in '46, coming out of the war and the arrival of the president at the end, and that obviously had an emotional impact, so unlike anything we could get today. I mean, the piece was born out of the end of the Second World War. It's similar to, for example, 1776 that I did, that came out of Vietnam, really, was born from the Vietnam War. And another piece that I did with Jim Whitmore, Give 'Em Hell Harry, really came out, about Harry Truman, really came out of Watergate. So each of these three plays that I'm talking about were very much of their period. So within that period, there's a certain built-in excitement for that particular audience. However, a play like this that does stand the test of time, just as, say, Shakespeare or whatever, not to compare it to Shakespeare, 20 years, 40 years, 100 years later, and the character that it portrays, Oliver Wendell Holmes, it's interesting to see, does he still speak to us? And I think very much so does he speak to us. In fact, we did the play during the bicentennial, Jim and Audra and I, and it was very nice because there was the bicentennial, and here's Oliver Wendell Holmes and all that. But I think that what this man is saying in the play speaks to us more today, and is more relevant than it was even in the bicentennial. And so that was really the reason that we decided to dust it off and do it.
The whole concept of free speech and the fact that the law is a living instrument and that it evolves with civilization, it's beautifully instilled throughout this piece.
There is some deconstruction or reconstruction of the Holmes image, but I certainly know that the words in this play are his words, and those words speak to an audience, and I think it's for that reason that literally every night at the end the audience is on their feet. I mean, certainly the performances are wonderful, but I think that there is something about this play, and I think it really has to do with that man, and the two of them, this extraordinary relationship between Holmes and Fanny, that is very meaningful to a modern audience.
There's information in this play that tells us that Holmes was indeed a jurist, he was an author, he was a philosopher, and he was the great dissenter. But you have to be careful, I would imagine, as a director, to make sure all this information, these key elements, get out somewhere within the context of this play. That's a major challenge.
Well, I always try to look at the play through the eyes of the audience and pretend that I never heard of Oliver Wendell Holmes and that I don't know anything about him. If they just get a sense of what he's talking about here, if they get a sense of the man, and the same thing was true again with 1776, that nobody heard anything, the revolution and I don't know, whatever. But if kind of looking at it that way, because then it's not a history lesson, then you're really dealing with the people. And you sort of, the information is sort of slipped in, sugar-coated, if you will. So I prefer to just not worry about that too much and let it happen organically.
Now, most lecturers have written a book, you know, generally on sex. I never written a book on sex, but as soon as I find out something about it, I'm going to write one. You know, when a man gets into politics, he just naturally spoils it for any honest work the rest of his life. They're just children that never grow up, folks. And that's the way. That is why, folks, I never take a politician seriously, and I hope I never do, really. Well, it'll be a sign of senility when I take one of them birds seriously.
These men that you have portrayed are very similar, in a way, in that they sought the counsel of their peers, and yet they knew the right course.
Yeah, yeah. I think that's right. I think also they had a great reverence for the experiment that is the United States of America. Stress experiment. Because it's still in, you know, in limbo as far as will it endure, as Lincoln said.
Just last week, we completed, folks, and built the first hospital for the Indians in the United States of America. Well, you know, what he discovered, what, about 400 years ago, didn't he, Columbus? Well, it's taken us 400 years to build a hospital for the Indians. Boy, just think what us Indians have got to look forward to in the next 400 years. Well, they might even build a cemetery for us. So we set out helping the world, you know. I don't know, it seems to me lately we've been yelling help more than giving it. Folks, we're in the humanity business, you know that, and by golly, we're going to do it right. Oh, come on, folks, if we had any morals, we'd use them ourselves, you know that. Of
course, Will Rogers, he embodied all of the wisdom of the universe, you know, in my view. I think Rogers probably was the most of all the men I portrayed or tried to portray, Teddy Roosevelt included, even though he wrote something like 30 books, you know, and is known to be an intellectual, which he bloody well was in his own way. Will Rogers really had the human condition pretty well under control and expressed it with marvelous humor and the sense that we are all infinitesimal in the large picture, you know.
When you were at Ford's Theater and you did Give 'Em Hell Harry, there was a very special night when President Gerald Ford sat in the audience. I want you to share that story.
Well,
I
think, and I'm pretty sure of this because I checked it with Frankie, he was the first sitting president that had been in Ford's since the assassination. Sitting president. And I had to go down as Harry Truman on the walk that he took, you remember, with the press, you know, at a military gate, and stand about the distance that I am from you, which is about 4 feet, and say that Richard M. Nixon, who he had just pardoned, was a terrible liar, that if he ever caught himself telling the truth, he would tell a lie just to keep his hand in. Now, that was, it seems to me, a confluence of historical rivers that just came together there in a great whirlpool. And as I stood in front of Jerry Ford, who incidentally was responsible for my going to Yale University. Oh yes, yeah, he was the guy that wrote me the letter and said, "Well, you know, you'll have all of the stuff you need here." I was a football player, and stood in front of Jerry, and uttered these words, and it was a moment that I will never forget as long as I live.
Are you continually amazed at how much energy James has on stage, not only in this role, but when you've seen him in other things? He moves like a 20-year-old.
I call it intensity. You know, I find it difficult to relax, but I like the contrast between the two characters because she doesn't let it affect her too much, and he is quite energetic.
You play Phoebe's grandmother. In the very popular Friends.
Oh yes. Well, of course, I only did this one show, and I hadn't watched the show before. They sent me a tape, and I thought, I just don't have time for what. But I did not realize that it was such a popular show. I certainly knew it after I did it because everybody, it seems to me, saw it. Everybody came up to me and said, "Oh, I saw you on Friends. I saw you on Friends." I told my grandchildren, they were so thrilled at my being on Friends. If I'd been playing Lady Macbeth on Broadway, they wouldn't have impressed them at all. But to be on Friends made me something really important in their eyes.
Some of the great figures of history, like Justice Holmes, Harry Truman, and Will Rogers, are gone from us now. But thanks to artists like James Whitmore, Audra Lindley, and director Peter Hunt, they're brought to life for us once again, if only for a few hours. Until next time, remember, art was meant to be appreciated, so you be a part of it.